Welcome to the Illuminate Universe podcast, The Cast. Get it? The Cast? My name is Alina, and I'm the founder of Illuminate, where we mentor job seekers and help employers to fast-track their business goals. I interview a celebrity cast of incredible individuals who have truly inspiring careers. We're talking about their work journey, the process of taking the leap to create a life and career they love, and what happens when they push aside their fears and doubts to unleash their fullest potential. Today, we speak with Sam Thiara, who teaches at the BD School of Business at Simon Fraser University, and who is also the founder and chief motivating officer at Ignite the Dream Coaching and Consulting, a platform that engages his audience to define their path. Sam has completed his master's in leadership from University of Exeter in England and a certificate in higher education from Harvard University. He has authored 2 books, one on storytelling and the other a travel memoir about his journey to India, to finding his ancestral roots with a faded photograph. He has also spoken at 2 different TedX conferences. Well, hi, Sam. Welcome to the podcast. Our first question for you is share with our audience where you are presently and the journey you've been on.
Sure, absolutely. I think the best way for me to describe my journey is where I am presently in the past. Think of it as structured and organic. And where I am right now is a very organic environment where I have the opportunity to pick and choose what is it that really resonates and is important to me. So I have multiple projects that I'm working on that I'm very fulfilled by. But it wasn't as simple as that. I mean, I think for me, it was a trajectory that is very common as a narrative that many people have experienced and lived. I mean, I'm in post-secondary, university. Now, trying to decide what is it that I'm going to do when I graduate. And I graduated with a degree in business and political science. And you know what? What a great combination. I mean, who's going to be lucky to get me? So as I crossed the stage, shook the hands of the dignitaries at graduation, I walked off the stage and it felt like a giant door slammed behind me and there was no handle. Everything familiar to me was behind that door. And now I have to transition and get a job. Well, I did what most people would do. You start applying for jobs. So I remember shortly after graduating, I applied for 12 jobs. And I thought, okay, who's lucky to get me? 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Back then, there was no internet. You actually had to write letters. And I remember a letter arrived and I was like, okay. And I opened it up and it was from one of the 12 companies and it said, sorry, we don't have a job for you and good luck. And I thought, okay, you're not lucky. It's okay. I've got 11 more letters and I'm going to send 3 more out today. So I sent them out and Jessica, was interesting. It was literally like the tide. The more letters I sent out, the more rejections came back, to the point where I have 86 rejection letters. These are 86 rejection letters. It literally is the size of a brick, weighs as much as a brick. And I have no idea why I kept all these rejection letters as they came in, because every single rejection letter was a nail in my coffin of self-confidence. And the narrative had switched from who's lucky to get me to, am I lucky to get a job? Well, my first job, somebody gambled on me and I got it. So business and political science. One would think, okay, he gets an entry-level government job. Yes, I got an entry-level government job. I was a janitor in a hospital, mopping floors and emptying rubbish bins because it was part of the government employees union. But instead of looking at it from a negative standpoint, I said, what am I going to learn from this? There are 3 valuable lessons that I carry forward to this day that helps me who I am today. The first lesson, my father said, I don't care what you do, you make sure you do the best job possible because your reputation is on the line. I carry that mentality in anything and everything I do. Second valuable lesson, there were times I would get on the elevator with nurses, doctors, and administrators, and I was ignored because you're not a professional. I know what it feels like to be ignored. And this is why over the years, I talk and I continue to talk to everybody because everybody's got a story. And the third valuable lesson is rather than looking at it as a negative situation, I went in with this growth mindset of what can I learn from being a janitor? Like, in other words, I went with a curious mind, and I went in and I embraced it. And it taught me that in anything and everything I do in life, go in with a curious mind because there are lessons to be learned. I think what happened though is that eventually, you once that rocky start happens, technically you hit sort of that career rock bottom. I then started to progress saying, okay, whatever I was prepared for, I was ill prepared. And then eventually I got a retail job in a management role, didn't like it. Then I got a corporate job working for the provincial government, in the insurance corporation of BC. I could do the job, but it wasn't me. And my career felt like an ill-fitting suit. I could wear it, but it just didn't fit. I could do the job, but it just didn't fit. That's where the transition happened. When I started reflecting on, instead of just jumping to another job, I stopped. I started reflecting, introspection, and I said, but what's important to me? What is it that I want as I move forward? And I came up with 5 things that I decided I was not going to compromise. And when I did that, the job I was holding hit 0 out of 5. But then I thought, okay, if I'm going in another direction, what is it? That's when I came up with the job that hit 5 out of 5. And it just all of a sudden wasn't a job or career, it was fulfillment. And that's always guided me, those 5 core elements. And I've changed them over the years. But what it's enabled me to do is always compare, contrast, to basically say the opportunities that now emerge, do they line up with the 5 things that I'm not willing to compromise? And that's enabled me to go from a structured organization, a structured career, into something that's organic and that's very fulfilling now.
So based on your journey, would you say it was more planned or organic?
I think initially it started out planned, and just that whole narrative of structure. And I see this in so many of the people I mentor and coach, is that laid out plan. But then it eventually, the moment it shifted to organic, it suddenly made sense. And it goes back to this idea that goals and having goals and incentives, or goals and objectives in life. What it made me realize is that I don't have goals. And people thought, oh my gosh, he's aimless. No, I have these intentions. 5 things that I'm not willing to compromise. And the reason for me, and I'm not saying if you have goals, you're wrong, but it's just another perspective, because I find for me, goals are very limiting. Goals, you're on this pathway to say point A to point B. And if an opportunity emerges that doesn't line up with your goal, do you give up the goal or the opportunity? It's very absolute. Instead, any opportunities that come, I compare it to those 5 things I'm not willing to compromise. And that's the part that for me has enabled me to go from which initially was a very structured way of looking at things, to something that's much more organic now.
So how did you realize your journey? How did all of this happen?
One of the most important things, which I think we don't do, is reflect and realize that I think what happens is we get so caught up in the everyday routines that we forget that, let's take a moment to reflect on the journey. Is this something I'm supposed to do on purpose? So I believe that the importance of all of this is to actually take the time to reflect and introspect where you are in your life and journey. And I remember a quote that is, in order to vision the future, reflect on the past while you stand on the crack that's the present. And that quote, I think, is really important, because in order to vision your future, you do need to reflect on your past. What courses did I do that I liked? What the jobs that I've held in the past, what did I learn from them? And that's the process that one can do to support and help them in that journey. But I think reflection is one of the most important pieces that might be missing, but that we need to incorporate into our life.
And would you say that your education played an important role in discovering your journey?
It did. Education, I think that, again, when we look at education, I look at 2 words: knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is what you would get out of a textbook. Knowledge is what you would get out of a lecture. And you just absorb it, but you just never really apply it. The application of that is where once you start applying it and using it and playing with it, it now becomes wisdom. So think of it this way: someone can have knowledge but lack wisdom. So it doesn't mean that that's bad. It's just one component. So whatever you are learning, whether it's in school, whether it's a new process at work, whether it's, advancing your own personal life, whatever you learn, apply it. It's only when I started applying things that I realized it wasn't just a matter of absorbing it and learning something. How am I going to use it? And how is this going to help me in the future?
Now I have a very different question for you. Sam, can you share a setback that you've encountered?
Oh, many setbacks in life. I also wanted to just define there's a setback and there's failure. I think we use the word failure far too often, and it's just we throw it around. Failure is final. Setback, it's the exact same thing. Setback, you get back up, dust yourself off, learn from the experience, and you move even stronger. I mean, setback for me is the fact that, there are times where maybe I've applied for a position that I really thought that I should get, and that you had the qualifications. Instead of dwelling on a setback, what I do is I learn from it and I say, okay, so that didn't materialize. That didn't happen. What do I need to do that maybe elevates me to the next step? So for example, when I transitioned from ICBC in claims, for example, into road safety, it wasn't an easy, smooth transition that I was just suddenly gifted this position. I mean, when I decided to go forward into this area of road safety, because it really did align with who I was, I mean, I had no experience. So I contacted the person in the department. It was like a Friday. He said, Tuesday, come down to this park. I've got a display. Would love to talk to you about what I do. And I thought, great, okay, I'll go down there. And, I started learning about road safety. And the more I learned, the more I really thought, yeah, this is something that really resonates. And eventually he said, look, I think what would be great is I've got another event coming up in the future, but it's a couple of events, but I can't do them both. Do you want one of them? And I said, oh, absolutely. Then, I kept doing these events and helping in the road safety area as a volunteer. And my center manager came up. He said, yeah, I've noticed that you've been out there doing community relations. I really want to do that for office. Do you want to lead this? And I said, oh, absolutely. But here's the thing is, there was noise. People said, do you realize people are using you? You're not going to get this job. And I remember saying, but I'm having fun. So I carried on. And you know what? After 8 months of all of this volunteer work, not asking for what's in it for me, a job came up and I applied for it. And you know what? I didn't get it. And everybody suddenly said, when are you going to learn? You're not going to get in. They don't hire from inside, it's outside. I persisted because I knew, number one, I was having a lot of fun. Number two, it was like somewhere along the way, I know things are going to change for me. And after 14 months of doing this volunteer work and really enjoying myself, I got in and everybody said, oh my gosh, how did you do that? The challenge is they never see the journey. They don't see you working in the trenches. They only see the end result, which is the success. Embrace that journey. Embrace the fact that there are going to be setbacks. There are going to be successes. It's all part and parcel. And it goes back to one of my favorite quotes, which is obstacles are the necessary bricks on the road to success. Do not fear the obstacles, embrace them, because that's where the growth happens. And it's all part of the whole process of getting where you need to go.
What are some tips and ways that you overcame the obstacles with?
Yeah, I think, having this resilient attitude of, I think sometimes people just will try it once and they're like, not going to work, forget it, this isn't going to work. I actually thrive in ambiguity and uncertainty. I love that space. And I think for me, it's building that resilience to say, I am going to persevere. I am going to carry forward. Now, maybe the pathway does change, but equally at the same time, I think what's really important is this idea of persistence and resilience and listening to the voice within as opposed to the noise around you. That's what's going to carry on and keep you going.
What would you say are some essential skills that you think individuals should develop in order to thrive in the future of work?
There's definitely skills and abilities that I think are really important. It also depends on the type of position. I think clear communication is one of the critical components, in that clear communication means expressing yourself, but equally at the same time being open to the conversations. The art of conversation is equally important as well. So clear communication, conversation are skills that are important. It's also about having a realistic attitude and perspective. You're not going to be a director in a year unless you start your own company. So understand that it's about stepping away from this thing I call titles, really working to what matters to you and building that into who you are as an individual. And the other thing is taking the time to not express yourself by what you do, but to realize who you are, because by knowing who you are, the journey becomes more clear. It's almost like, instead of carrying a compass to try to figure out the direction you want to go, learn to become the needle in the compass where you now guide the direction you need to go. Those are the things that I think can help.
Now, there's a need for individuals to have confidence.
Mhm.
Do you have tips on how one might gain confidence and skills in a particular area that they're interested in?
Absolutely. I mean, and I think there's also an importance to realize that there's this fine line between confidence and cockiness. Cockiness is this attitude of like, yeah, I am the best. Confidence is this inner sense and feeling you have that, I am able to do all this, but I also am not afraid to ask questions. I think sometimes what happens is we may feel that it's going to, if not that you want to bug the fellow employee every 30 seconds to ask him, am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? But if you have legitimate questions, and that's confidence, is the ability to actually say, I think I might need some help here. So don't be afraid to ask. That's one. Also, to build confidence is this thing about working on your personal brand, because we all have a personal brand. But many people don't even know what their brand is. And when you have a personal brand that you can appreciate, you're now able to move forward with more confidence. And it's not even that. Because you have this confidence, opportunities start emerging because of that confidence. I call that becoming loud without a voice. In other words, your presence, not that you have to walk into a room and announce your arrival, but just this quiet confidence that you have that people look at going like, there's something about this person, or the fact that your reputation precedes you because of who you are. There's two words, character and reputation. Character is who you are. Reputation is people's perception of who you are. Guard both of those because that supports and helps your confidence.
Absolutely. And would you say it is better to be a specialist or a generalist in business?
And actually, I think it's important that both of those are important, depending on the role and responsibility the individual is pursuing. I mean, for me, I'm a specialist and a generalist. Now, what I mean by that is, if it's talking about, student engagement, alumni relations, and community outreach, career development for young people, I'm a specialist. That's an area that I can go into a university, college, or high school and be able to really support the development of those programs. Equally, I'm a generalist, meaning I also go into organizations where I know very little about the company or organization, but I sit there and I listen to them. And as a startup, they'll tell me about what they're working on. And then I'm going to ask questions. Well, have you thought of this? Or actually, here's somebody that I know that's in this area that I think could really support your business. When you're starting out in your career, I think it's important to start identifying, what you're a specialist in. Are you a finance specialist? Are you a marketing specialist, healthcare professional? And then, but also don't be afraid to start speaking as a generalist as well, so that it opens up those opportunities. So in a roundabout way, I guess what I'm cheating here is to say I'm both of those. I'm a specialist in certain areas, but I'm not afraid, because of the confidence we just talked about, to walk into another business or something I have very little knowledge about, but to be a generalist, because then I can ask those really important questions that the public would ask of them.
And now we have a series of rapid fire questions for you, Sam. The first one is, share your favorite book and why you feel it is worth reading.
Yeah, I could cheat on this, but no, I'll give you one. Sir Ken Robinson, he wrote The Element. And what I loved about the book is it really focuses on finding what your element is. What is it that becomes your superpower? And I really like the way that he describes it. So, and what that's enabled me, the person who gave me the book, I really love what they wrote. To the person who found their element so they could help other people find their element. So Sir Ken Robinson, The Element, I think is a really great book for people to read.
If your life is an autobiography, what would the title be?
If my life is an autobiography, what would the title be? It would be the fact that one needs to care. And caring in society, I think, is really important. I don't want to be a bystander in life. So what I've dedicated myself to is sharing with other people. I've been given a lot, but I'm not allowed to hold on to it. So I have to give it away. So I think that's what the title of my autobiography would be, is there is a need for me to care.
What is your outlet?
There's a couple of outlets I have. I think an outlet is really important because it frees your mind from the everyday. For me, woodworking is an outlet because it just allows me to just work on something to make it from something that's raw and organic into something that's beautiful. But also another outlet that I have is my writing. I think by writing, it allows me to self-reflect. So the writing and the woodworking are two of my outlets.
What are you grateful for and why?
I'm grateful for the people around me. And the reason I say that is because it goes back to Sir Isaac Newton said, I've only been able to see far because I stood on the shoulder of giants. I'm grateful for all of the conversations that I've had and all the people that I've been able to meet, because they've opened up so many opportunities in my life that has given me purpose and fulfillment.
What or who inspires you?
It's an interesting question because it could also be this aspect of, who's your mentor? I'm inspired by not one particular person. I'm inspired by someone who has creativity, is not afraid of being an ambiguous or an unstructured environment. I'm inspired by someone who is not a bystander in life, who's willing to roll up their sleeves to make a difference in their community.
Sam, that sounds just like you. Do you inspire yourself?
I think it's not so much inspiring myself, but because there's this beautiful alignment of who I am and this quiet confidence. That's why I said I've been given so much that I'm not allowed to hold on to it. I have to give it away. And the more I give away, the more keeps coming back to me.
Our last question for you is, provide an inspirational quote and why it is important to you.
I think it goes back to the autobiography quote you said earlier. For me, the quote that I live by is, everyone's life is an autobiography. Make yours worth reading. Every single one of us is a living story. Every single one of us has significance and purpose. And I think we just need to remember how important we are as individuals and how much of an impact that we do make. I really want people to start living their autobiography and to make it so that it becomes worth reading.
Okay, well, that wraps up our episode. Thank you so much, Sam, for being on our podcast.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share today.